This video contains the use of dangerous tools and materials that can be hazardous to children. Please remember proper safety techniques if you choose to attempt to build this layout yourself. Thank you. So I started recently using my Twitter account, which you should totally go and follow by the way, and one day I simply posted this, and a lot of people seemed interested. So a few posts later, I revealed that over the last few months, I had been building a Plarail version of Reverend Wilbert Awdry's Mark I Ffarquhar. But why out of Plarail? Because model trains in New Zealand are bloody expensive. However, I did own a lot of Plarail track, so why not just use that? This layout was a huge learning experience for me, using a lot of new techniques that were both effective and extremely cheap, if not free. So, join me as I show you step by step how I built my Ffarquhar Plarail way. I can't stress enough that the only reason that this layout exists was because my two sons asked me to build them a Tomy track. Of course I said yes, and went about searching for layout inspiration. Now, normally my two go-to channels for custom Thomas sets are users MTI and Master of Tracks. Go subscribe to their channels, linked in the description. However, while I was searching for ideas, I came across a layout by Whitehouse Productions on YouTube, aka Michael White, fellow Thomas fan and show writer for Thomas and Friends. I stumbled across a video of his replica of Awdry's Mark I Ffarquhar. This layout's spectacular, there's no denying that. And after studying both Michael's and Awdry's layouts, I started planning how to Tomify it, if you will. But first, what is Ffarquhar? Well, in order to understand Awdry's Ffarquhar layout, I asked Michael White to better explain Farquhar's history. So I'll hand the mic over to him, and who knows, maybe we'll learn something new about Thomas's branch line.
Hello there, this is Michael. Alright, here we go. In the mid-1950s, the Reverend W. Awdry was approached by the Wisbech Trades Fair, requesting him if he could build a small model railway to show their annual fete the following year. At the time, he was having problems with his own current model railway, a second variation of his first model of the northwestern region. The layout had potentials of being a very impressive model railway, with the complete route of Thomas's branch line being worked into the plans. However, the layout had complications and issues to which numerous derailments and automatic technical faults held back time devoted to scenery and world building. For the new smaller layout, the Reverend would have to think basic and simple designs. Previous plans for a model layout always had Thomas's branch line featured, so it made sense to base the layout on it. The Ffarquhar branch was built to the size of 4 feet by 6 feet on two separate boards, which would fold on top of each other to allow the layout to be transported to shows around the country. The layout was based on the top station of Thomas's branch line, Ffarquhar, and consists of the standard oval loop with a set of sidings hidden behind the back scenes to allow other engines in stock to venture out and work a planned timetable. Because of time to get the layout built in time for the show, off-the-shelf products were mainly used for most of the building. Some of these ready-to-buy items you can still buy in the shops today, such as the car kit for Ffarquhar Station's main buildings. The engines that worked the layout were Thomas, Percy, and Toby, with Duck being used as a spare goods engine. A sequence of movements was devised to allow each engine to come out of its hidden siding and perform a prototypical movement about the layout, be it bringing passengers or goods to and from the station. The sequence would then end with all rolling stock and locos back to where they were from the very start, ready to begin the sequences all over again. The layout performed well at the fete, and over the years had toured the country attending various shows. During this time, the layout was updated with new buildings and sceneries, as well as new locos and rolling stock to further enhance the layout's updated sequences. These engines included Daisy the Diesel rail car, Mavis the quarry diesel, and guest engines Stepney and Oliver, who would bring an enthusiast train to the last third of the timetable movements. It truly was a remarkable and reliable layout.
Thank you so much, Michael. Please go and check out his channel in the description. But with that brief history lesson out of the way, let's get building. What you're currently looking at was the earliest original layout that I built for my boys. The layout mostly focuses on the station and yard section of Awdry's layout. However, while testing the layout, I noticed that there was a lot of shunting potential on the layout. If only the trains could go backwards. But with a track plan finalised, it was time to work on the table. The layout sits on a custom table, using a board I had laying around which is 61cm by 122.5cm. It fit my track plan perfectly. The legs I found on the side of the road one day. And like a true packer, I snatched those suckers up, and they were soon bolted to the table. I need to add a centre brace to the legs so that it's a bit more stable, but as it is, I'm really happy with it. The track was then laid and glued in place. Next, I went about making the cut-off board and tunnel structure. The tunnel was pretty simple, a small wooden structure that the engines could all fit under, and a hole cut off in the cut-off board leading behind the layout. However, this is where I found my first problem. Because of the curves behind the cut-off board, the engines would often get stuck against the cut-off board. This was a problem because there was no real way to get both ends of track to connect with what pieces I had. Sure, I could have bought some of the Plarail flexi track, but I needed a fix now. I couldn't wait however long for something to arrive in the mail. So, after much consideration, I just cut the track. This was the only way to make this work. I tried so hard and so many different ways to not use the illegal track connections. But hey, the trains don't get stuck anymore, and you can't even see the illegal connections from the viewing side. So for me, that's a win. I'm going to come out and say this right now. I hate most of the ready-to-buy backdrops that you can get from model shops. To me, they just don't look that good. Not to mention, I can never get them to lay flat. Or maybe they just won't line up properly. I did consider painting my own backdrop, but that genuinely scared me, as I hadn't painted a picture since I was a little kid. How was I meant to paint a backdrop that not only looked convincing, but also do it without screwing it up completely and having to tear up the whole backdrop and do it again? So what did I do? I spent an entire night watching Bob Ross. I'm not joking. After studying all the different ways to paint a fluffy little cloud and a happy little tree, I broke out the brushes and paint, and oh my god, holy shit, this is working! Once I realized you have to paint what's furthest away and build up the layers to the foreground, I couldn't believe it. It looked so good. I couldn't believe that I'd painted this lush British countryside and it didn't suck. I then decided to go on Google and print out some pictures of old British country houses, cut them out and add them to the backdrop. Oh, they look so good. And one of the pictures had a road running down the middle of it. And that got me thinking, how are people supposed to get to the station to catch the trains? How does the cattle dock service the railway if there's nowhere to transport it? So I decided it was time to start. Adding a road was always part of the plan. Here, in my original plan I drew up for the layout, the road would cross the two main tracks, connect to the cattle dock, and then blend into the road on the backdrop. An intersection is present which branches off behind the station into a small parking lot for cars and buses to access the station. Originally, I wanted a road going over the hill the tunnel was built on. However, that road was very quickly cut from the final layout. I lined out where I wanted the road, and then using air-dry clay, I spread and smoothed it out, trimming the edges with a craft knife for a cleaner look, and waited for the clay to dry. The clay did crack in some places, but these were filled in with more clay, and once dry and rock hard, I painted the road grey. On the crossings, I used strips of cardboard and painted them in the same grey as the road. It's not perfect, and it's a bit uneven in some spots, and there are still some small cracks, but to me it shows that the road is used. Real roads wear down over time with heavy use, and I feel my road reflects that very nicely. Awdry's Ffarquhar layout has many different set pieces, so when designing my layout, I wanted to include what I felt were the key buildings and set pieces from Awdry's original layout. Obviously we need to include Ffarquhar Station, that is the main set piece of the layout. The platform is made of honeycomb cardboard that was painted up, and the station building is just the standard Tomy Ffarquhar station, but repainted and weathered. Behind the station is the refuel station, complete with a water tower, coal bunker and diesel pump. The diesel pump is a Tomy fuel tanker with its wheels removed and repainted, sitting on a painted base made of foam. The coal bunker is a cardboard construction painted black and filled with charcoal that was then glued in place. And the water tower is made from cardboard, a paintbrush stem and an old phone charger cable. The hose of the water tower can actually swivel as well. And yes, I used some N-scale track I had as a ladder, alright? Don't judge me. Just beyond the station is the cattle dock, made from a foam base that was painted up, with matchsticks and strips of card for the fencing. Across from the station is a small halt. In my mind, quarry workers would depart from Thomas's train, cross over to this halt, where they are then taken by Toby to the quarry. The halt was built from a jumbo popsicle stick that was cut at either end to make the slopes, matchsticks were used for the halt's legs, and the plank work was made from strips of card and painted brown. On Awdry's layout, when the engines went behind the cut-off board, it stated that the line goes to the quarry. Now the quarry itself isn't seen on the layout in any capacity. However, I wanted to include that the quarry was there. So, on the back scene leading behind the layout, you can see some rock starting to build up leading to the quarry. The quarry rock was achieved by using pieces of bark and air-dry clay to fill any gaps. It was then given a wash of black, white and grey paints before getting a more cream colour over the top. Boom! Rock face complete. I've used the same techniques for hills on my layouts for years now, and it's never failed me. With the tunnel structure built, I used scrunched up newspaper to form the shape of the hills. It was then covered with masking tape and then a few layers of paper mache. Once all of that was dry, I started looking at grass options. For quite a while, I was using this static grass mat to cover the hill. This looked okay, but I wasn't fully convinced on how it looked. I knew that turf grass was what I needed. However, I would need multiple bags and multiple different shades for this layout. And that would very quickly start heavily adding to the cost of this layout. So far for this layout, the only things that I've bought are paint, clay and glue. So how was I going to make my own grass? What about bushes or trees? Well, I found a video on YouTube about someone showing us how to make your own grass turf for dioramas and model layouts. And this method was so simple, so creative and so effective. Once I saw that video, I sprang into action. I made so many grass shades using nothing but a plastic container, a stirring stick, paint and sawdust. This stuff looks incredible. It was so simple. I had heaps of sawdust lying around, and once it was glued down, I gotta say, it looks better than most of the store-bought stuff. I should also mention that before laying the grass down, I had laid down a layer of dirt as a base coat for a more natural look. Making bushes and shrubbery was surprisingly easy. I bought a 3-pack of sponges, cut them up into tiny pieces, and like the grass, mixed them with different paints, and voila! We have homemade clump foliage. I do have some more fuzzier looking bushes on the layout as well, and well, it's lichen that naturally grows on parts of my fences. Free and effective. Next to the road and behind the station is a retaining wall, used to help blend the town and the background in a little better. The wall itself was made by cutting the backs of 2 Tomy Ffarquhar stations and gluing them together. I added some shrubbery along the tops to blend them nicely into this small flat hill. This hill is here so that when the engines disappear behind the layout, it looks more natural when they go out of sight, rather than just going behind a harsh cut. Now, as much as I really wanted to make my own trees, which I have done on previous layouts, I bought the trees for this layout. Look, I was in a $2 shop and they looked the part, alright? So I just grabbed a handful. One day I will replace these with some sort of handmade trees, but for now, they do the part. Finally, for scenery stuff, we have kitty litter, which I've used for ballast on the tracks. A very nice and cost-effective method. I've also reused some Trackmaster buffers at the end of the sidings. These have been cut down slightly to accommodate the layout. And finally, we have a Tomy signal box on the station platform. And that is just the standard Tomy signal box. At last, after 3 months of work, here is the final layout. I cannot tell you how proud I am of this layout. Sure, it's not some big, fancy, expensive DCC controlled layout, but it still gives me the same satisfaction, while still keeping the playability of the Plarail system. My goal wasn't to make a replica of Awdry's layout, but more something that paid tribute to his layout, taking all the key aspects of the original and making my own vision of it. I love how the final layout came out. But more importantly, I hope that this video inspires people to give layout building a go. It doesn't have to be big. Think outside the box. And most importantly, have fun. It's been so satisfying seeing this layout slowly evolve as more was added to it over time. Seeing the trains run around on a layout that you've built is such a dopamine hit. Speaking of trains, I've talked long enough now. Let's watch some trains running around the Ffarquhar Play Railway. Motherfucker!
Ow.
You!
What?
How do you pronounce the name of this station?
What?
How do you pronounce the name of this station?
Farquhar?
That's what I thought, but no! It's Ffarquhar!
You're a fucker!